guys
Probably cannot even see that.
Or we're gonna do that. Oh, I'm gonna do that show early. Yeah, but we don't even play till 6. What? It's like an hour drive. Why would we walk to get 5 minutes? It's terrible. Like 40. Longer than that. 45. He said, "I'm not going."
All right, people, we finished up here yesterday talking about Leonardo da Vinci as a Renaissance man, that embodied the idea of what that meant to be a well-rounded person, that you were using all different parts of your brain, the artistic side of your brain, the math side of your brain, to create this well-rounded person. We don't use that term very often to describe many other people, except usually Leonardo. Again, all of these things that embody what it means to be the Renaissance, found in Leonardo da Vinci. All right, upper class, more affected by the Renaissance than the lower class. So this is one of the things that will really be important as we move through history, or any time that you're looking at history, is that things that happen. Is this not where we're at? Everybody looks puzzled. Okay.
There's a blank after.
It's what?
Surviving and blank, but there's nothing up there for that.
Oh, poorer people always concerned with eating and surviving. Just leave that. That's all it is. Oh gosh, I gotta go back and fix that. When my daughter was a senior, my youngest daughter, she and a couple of her friends figured out my password and went in and made lots of changes on my notes. They were usually pretty funny, like "Mom, I love you," but I thought I had caught them all, and I haven't. But anyway, so let's go back. Poor people. Typically, when we talk about these big ideas like the Renaissance or the Enlightenment or any of those things, most often poor people are not impacted by that. And it takes a long time for any kind of historical change to make a change for poor people, because they're concerned with eating and surviving. And there's not much else for them in their life. Oh, somebody's leaving. Hello? Yes. Okay, thanks. It is you, honey. And we don't have another assignment today, honey. We're just going to finish working on the one, and we're only going to do a couple of slides, so you should be able to catch up tomorrow. Okay, so poor people. Poor people always trying to survive, and they are usually never really considered as part of society. And so for that reason, it takes a long time for poor people to have any impact and for really anything to change about their life, almost until the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. Churches, wealthy homes, public buildings displayed art that celebrated the human body. And so that, again, is one of the Renaissance sculptures that you might know of. David, that you may have seen before. First, usually, unless anybody ever seen it in person, it's like 9 feet high. So it's really hard to get the scale of what these pictures are like when you just see the marble statue. It's giant. And when we look at the Renaissance work, most of it, again, is a celebration of a beautiful human body. The classical antiquity, and again, we kind of take that with the Renaissance and start adding religious themes that will add to that. And one of the things that's important is that, understanding of wealthy homes. People are going to commission these artists to paint works of art for them. So you could pay Leonardo da Vinci, you could pay Donatello a fee or a commission, and they would create artwork for you. For these Italians in these wealthy homes, they didn't necessarily want it on the inside of their homes. They wanted it on the outside. So they would have these gigantic, beautiful doors with golden inlay sculptures. They would have statues, like David, put in their front plazas so that people could see their wealth. It is no different than today. And I'll use something that I don't understand, because I certainly understand why people spend a lot of money on purses, but I do not understand why a lot of people spend money on rims on their cars, because they're rims and they make your car go around. And my $50 rims do just as well as those $800 rims. I don't get it. But those of you that do, you do it so that people know you have spent $800 on your rims. This is what art is like for the Renaissance. It's more than just art that we look at in the 21st century hanging on walls. This was stuff that went in people's homes to show I'm wealthy and I have a lot of money. And again, for the most part, that's why there's so many statues, because they went outside. I think the thing about the Statue of David and what elevates art that makes it so, because I am greatly impressed with people that have artistic ability, is the scale and proportion. And then when you look at very close parts of David, that you see his veins raised in his hands, it's unbelievable that you can do that with marble. So that again is what this artwork meant. These people were not creating artwork to hang in museums, because there aren't any. They created this artwork for people to have and display. It is one of the few times, historically speaking, and in art history, that artists were recognized in their time period for their artistic ability. So these people in their time period were rock stars. They were elevated, famous people. Everyone knew who they were. Everyone desired to have the paintings done by them, as opposed to someone like Van Gogh, Starry, Starry Night, who starved his life away because nobody wanted his paintings. And it is a very different time, artistic speaking, for these artists. Any questions about that? Okay. We're now going to look at these different Italian city-states. And very much, now if you remember when we last looked at city-states and talked about city-states, we were talking about Greece, if you can remember that from that time period. And then the Romans kind of took over. We're still going to stick with those city-states. And Italians will also have city-states. Is there anyone in here that has an Italian family background, that you're Italian? Or one of the things about the Italian city-states is that it does stay like that for a really long period of time. We are not going to have a unified Italy until we get to the 1880s. So if your family is Italian and came to the United States before 1880s, your family wasn't really Italian. They came from a very specific city-state. They were Sicilian, or they were Venetian, or they were a Florentine. They were not really an Italian, because that word did not exist yet, because there wasn't really one giant Italian nation. As we talked about yesterday, these places are going to prosper because of trade from the Crusades. That's why people had this wealthy money. That's why people had money and were wealthy. And that's why they had money that they could spend on art. And that, again, will be what makes this these three city-states especially really important: Milan, Venice, and Florence. And for those of you that have a small or maybe a large base of knowledge for these Italian places, Venice is the one with the canal. So Venice is the one that is close to sea level, and they have, as well as they do have streets, but they have a large portion of their cities made up of canals. So the first one we're going to look at is Milan. Milan is up at the top of the state, so of the nation. So if we can think of that boot, up at the top is where Milan is at. And the reason we're looking at these three city-states is that each one of them is governed differently. Milan is a crossroad at the top with these Italian coastal cities. Sforza conquered the cities with mercenaries. So this is a really wealthy guy. He gets himself a whole bunch of mercenaries. He conquers the city, and when he conquers it, he makes himself a duke. He says, I'm going to be royal. I'm going to have background, and this city is now mine. And he will run the city of Milan, and as well as his families. He builds a strong centralized state, an efficient tax system. He's going to generate a lot of revenue for that city state. So when we ask, or when we're asked about Milan, Milan is a noble city state because a guy just made himself that. He made and created his own sense of nobility. Venetians are going to be different. Venice is going to be different, and I would put a star by Venice because this is one that we need to understand and know, because Venice is going to be run by businessmen. So the government of Venice is made up of wealthy merchants. So everything that Venice and the Venetian government does is to serve business. So one of the things Venice will not do is have an army, because an army drains your treasury reserves. So if I'm a businessman, this will be my bet. I don't want to pay a standing army every day. I don't want to pay people to do nothing. I have so much money. If I need an army, I'll just buy one. And so for Venice, it becomes a very stable place to govern business, but not as far as being protected and being safe. And we'll find out why that's important in a couple slides. Venice is an international power. And again, mostly because they are run by businessmen. So all the government decisions are based on what's best for business, right? We're not concerned about people voting or property rights or any of those things or protection. We're not going to spend money on things that don't give us some kind of profit. And for Venice, this is really good until somebody attacks you. Then you're in big trouble, and they are going to be attacked, and they're going to be in big trouble. Our last one is Florence. And Florence is really the center at this time of these Italian city-states, more so than Rome, like what we would think. Florence is really the center. It's going to be the artistic center. So if you were a promising artist in this time period, Florence would be where you would want to be. That's where the artists are at that take on apprentices. One of the really interesting things about the art world that makes it difficult in the art world is that painters like Leonardo and Michelangelo taught art to their apprentices. And they also taught that art in the same way that they painted. So it's very difficult for artists to say sometimes 100% sure that one of those artists painted that picture, because they had all of these apprentices working. It was really like an art workshop. And Florence is the place to go. In 1432, the Medici take control of Florence. When you think of Florence and when you think of the Medici, you need to think gangsters. You need to think mob. You need to think anything that reminds you of the idea that this city is going to be controlled by a mob-like family. And as a result of that, they will again be very corrupt. They are again a group of people that are very, very corrupt, prone to large excesses, giant houses. So the money that comes into Florence goes into line my pockets. So we have a priest that says people in Florence are being corrupted by the Medici. And as a priest, I cannot let that happen. I cannot let the salvation of these souls of the people of Florence be jeopardized by this corruption. So with the help of many others, our priest now comes to power and instantaneously begins regulations on things that he deems are sinful. Gambling. We don't get much opportunity in this class to talk about the society of this time period, but these people had large issues with gambling, especially nobility. Nobility, they have no jobs. They don't really have anything that they do, right? They don't have to go to work. They don't have jobs. They pretty much have recreation all the time. And so one of their recreation begins gambling. And it's about anything. It's about who's going to walk around the corner in a white shirt first, who's going to sneeze first. They bet on dogs. One of the favorite is, do any of you have little rat terriers or any kind of dog that's like a terrier type dog? That is the purpose of those dogs, are to ferret out rodents. So that's what they would do. They would take these little dogs. They'd have a big roped off or pin type area, and they would throw a gazillion rats in there. And then they would throw dogs in and time them and see which dog got the most rats. Do you guys have experience with betting on rats and terriers? Okay, just an inside joke. Okay. It is one of the things that poor people could make money catching rats for these rat terriers. They bet on everything. They bet on who was going to drop their fork at dinner, who was going to do anything next was a gambling. No swearing, no dancing, no painting, and anything else that could potentially be fun was banned while the Dominican priest controlled Florence. Needless to say, they don't control them very long because Savonarola is going to be convicted of heresy. So what is heresy? Heresy is a word that can be used in many different ways for many different purposes. When governments use heresy, like the Medici, it usually is because we need to find a way to kill you. And heresy can be anything as simple as, hey, I don't like the way the Pope's hat looked today. Boom, heresy. You can't talk bad about the Pope. Or truly something that will be heresy when we get to Martin Luther. And he will be executed for criticizing the Pope. Also, when we talk about execution, one of my favorite things, execution is a long, drawn-out affair. It is not something simple that you're just going to get your head cut off and stuck on a pike and be done. If you were convicted of heresy, it is very similar to treason. Have we talked about what happens when you die, when you commit treason? The long, drawn-out things that happen to you? One of the first things, because you're going to get killed multiple ways if you can. The first thing is you will be hung until you lose consciousness. Then you will be snapped out of it with water. They'll wake you back up. Then pour lead in your eyeballs so you can't see in your next life. Cut off your tongue so that you can't speak. You will have, if you're a male, you will have your genitalia removed, and that will be cut off so that you can never have children in the next life. You are then burned with some hot pokers, put them in holes of your body where it would hurt really bad, and then they will draw and quarter you. So they'll take a sword and draw your torso into 4 spots and then drag your body apart so that all your insides fall out. You're still alive. That is the role of the executioner, is to keep you alive during all this. So this lasts like 10 hours. People bring their breakfast and their lunch to watch all this. And then eventually at the end, your head is removed. That was a nice day in the park for people in this time period. It was a gruesome event, and it was, again, saved for people who are convicted of heresy or treason. Every town had an executioner. That was a job. It was a job that was transformed between families. You could not be you could not be convicted of a crime unless you confessed. So there wasn't really trials for regular people. You had to confess to the crime. And it was a job of the executioner to get you to confess. And so the executioner would pretty much torture you until you confessed that you did it. And then you would hang and be done with it, and that would be the end. And the executioner would start with very small things because they couldn't make you bleed. That was one of the church issues of being tortured, is you could not bleed. So they would break the joints of your fingers, they would break the joints of your toes, they would leave you in a cell in a dark spot, and then do psychological torture, like walk up to your cell like they were going to get you, so that you get all anxious and then walk away, so you never knew when they were actually going to get you. They could burn you again with all kinds of hot pokers. They could poke things in your eyes, they could pull out your fingernails, bust the joints on your knees. Many people, when they finally did confess, because guess what? They always confessed, couldn't even walk to their hanging. They had to be brought up. Obviously, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's a topic I enjoy very much talking about. So the Medicis, they come back to power. And very quickly, what's going to happen is as these Italian city-states get richer and wealthier, and places like Venice say, we're not spending money for an army, or even if there is an army, it's an army for a small geographical place. France and Spain casually look over across that little Mediterranean Sea and see a whole lot of money. And we've talked about this before in many different scenarios. What's easier, making the money or taking the money? And for big, giant nations with powerful armies and navies, it's easier to take. And so that's what Charles VIII is going to do. He's going to occupy Naples, which Naples is right on that west coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Naples says, help us, Spain, come and save us, which is not a right thing to do, because what's going to happen for the next 30 years is Italy will be occupied by France and Spain, both fighting to control those Italian city-states. And in doing so, they will really change the culture of Italy. Those of you that are in Spanish, if you listen, because you don't know a lot of Spanish yet, if you listen to Italian, it kind of sounds like Spanish, and there is a lot of very similarities. They belong to the same language family, but a lot of that, again, is because the Italian city-states are going to be occupied by the Spanish for a very long period of time. Spanish troops are going to march into Rome. They want their money. Okay, we fought. We got the French kicked out of here. Where's our money? And when there's no money, the leaders of the mercenaries say, okay, find your money. And that's what we mean when we say it was sacked. It means all of these mercenaries go all throughout Rome and look and take things to equate to their payment. The sacking of Rome ended the wars and left Spain a dominant force in Italy. And it is significant and important when we talk about these city-states, why city-states are so vulnerable, why these small city-states are easily taken over by other countries, because they are not one dominant nation. All right, any questions about that? Sorry about the side rail of my torture. Just to throw this one out, because I like this one too. In England, they're going to have their own civil war, and they're going to cut off the head of Charles I, and Oliver Cromwell is going to be the Lord Protectorate, and he's going to die a nice, peaceful death. But when Charles II comes back, who is Charles I's son, who watched his dad's head get cut off, they dig up Oliver Cromwell's body, who's dead, and they do this to him again. They hang him, chop off his head, and then put it on a pike. So they kill a dead man. Just because. I know. See, that's.
And you like this?
They hung a dead man. They dug him up. They hung him, cut off his head, put it on a pike, dipped it in tar. And it stayed in the front of Tower of London for a really long time. In this time period, if we rode up to London and there would be heads on pikes, like lots of them, heads on pikes.